Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. Today, our guest is Dr. Hussein Korus Mayer. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a real.
You're MD and PhD, right? Is there a difference between which doctor you like to be referred to? Because they're both doctors.
Yeah, I'm a physician scientist, and at the end of the day, I'm here to help people. And it's really been through science and medicine and taking some of these cutting edge discoveries in medicine and telling people about it in order to help people. That's really what this is all about. Yeah.
So I want to ask you, being a scientist and doctor, what's the difference between the idea of disease management and an actual cure of disease?
Yeah. Well, cancer is a good example, right? Until now, we haven't had any sort of cures for cancer. And so it's been all about disease management, getting the symptoms under control and, being able to live with the symptoms of the disease. And so now in cancer, we're seeing actually cures, starting to happen with some of these newer treatments. And it's just the beginning. And we're also seeing it in mental health. Before, it's been about management of mental conditions, and now we're getting at the root causes of some of these issues. And the word cure can be used for that as well.
Yeah, so it's ironic that you're my guest on the show today because I had a really good friend of mine that passed away overnight from glioblastoma. So 364 days from the date of his diagnosis. So, so I have a kind of a personal interest in this too, because when we talk about disease management versus cure, I don't know if there's anything else that we invested in more than trying to find a cure for cancer. And I'm not putting you in a spot. I'm just curious because I went through this whole cycle of traditional therapeutics and trying to help him with other things except for what the science says. I mean, we know that there's science behind natural killer cell therapy and all these different, but no, the traditional medical machine has a protocol that they follow. So the protocol, none of it was designed, in my opinion, as a cure per se. It's let's prolong life, but it didn't mean anything about quality of life. I mean, I'm sure there was trials, but the side effects of all the treatments were horrendous. I mean, it totally morphed the person into completely aesthetically a different person. So the question I'm asking, and like it's an odd question to ask anyway, but is there incentive in the pharmaceutical type of medical industry to even have a cure for a disease like that?
It is. And I'm, first of all, very sorry to hear about your friend. This has been my life's mission and so many other doctors, scientists around the world. If you look back 20 years ago, where we've come in 20 years in understanding cancer, the types of treatments we're having now, we've made a lot of progress. There's still a long ways to go, but the quality of life is very important. And when drugs first get approved, they have to show that they prolong survival, right? And quality of life maybe doesn't, go into that approval, but definitely when we look to prescribe drugs, we look at the impact on quality of life, and that really matters to physicians and patients. And the more drugs we develop, we're now developing drugs that are now, for example, cell therapies approved for some types of blood cancers, single treatment and curative. And single dose. It's not like chemotherapy where you've got to get dose after dose. These are cellular therapy, single dose. We got a ways to go, but we got to keep going. It's tough work and it's a tough disease, but we're making progress.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. I'm glad that there's progress being made because there's so much money going into that, and I'm glad that there's some incentive. And one of the reasons why I bring that up is, and we'll talk about your book and all that stuff. I'm just curious because we're just having a conversation. Uh, I was on a call as a fly in the wall between insurance companies, the big ones, payers, and they were talking about the challenges they're facing in the next year. And the biggest challenge that we're facing is diabetes, the rise of diabetes. That's what they were saying. Their goal was to work somehow together to reduce the cost of insulin. And I was just sitting there, like biting my tongue and seething. And I was like, where is the preventative part and all the stuff that you talk about? Why isn't it being talked about on this whole, insurance doctor, this triangle of the patient, doctor, and payee?
Yeah. I mean, look, every field has its bad actors, and there are people in this to make money, trying to sell drugs like insulin at a premium, which is ridiculous. And so you got to call those bad actors out, and there's got to be regulation, because they're taking money away from this innovation, all this hard work we're trying to do. I think 80+% of drugs fail, and part of the reason our drugs are so expensive is because of so much failure, and we've got to pay for all those drugs that failed. But so I think I'm mindful of that, and actually I'm working on a cell therapy that is designed to be much less expensive, so that I'd love to democratize cell therapy so folks in other parts of the world can have it, because for now only the rich people are getting this, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Cell therapy, yeah.
So let me ask you, what does it mean to break through? What is the actual
Yeah.
definition of that?
So there's breakthrough, the single word breakthrough, which
Yeah.
is a breakthrough in medicine, let's say, or a breakthrough in this case, mental health and understanding of the brain. But there's also the two words, breakthrough. And if you look at the cover of this book, it seems like someone is breaking through a wall. And what is that? So in the context of this book, breaking through is sort of breaking through the ingrained habits of our own minds, and particularly this part of the brain called the default mode network, which is the wandering mind. We can talk about it. When you understand it and you learn about it so that it doesn't control you, you gain some control over it, you master it, you can break through to a much happier, peaceful place. This is kind of the same story Buddha talked about, let's say 2,500 years ago, and generation after generation of prophets and leaders and teachers have been saying this, but now there's some science here in this sort of age-old process of self-discovery, basically.
Let's go back. I want to sort of bridge the gap. Let's go back to your origin story. Let's let the audience know kind of where you grew up, and I'll try to incorporate some of my own story into your story because I think there's some similarities.
I think there might be, yeah.
Yeah. So where did you grow up?
So first generation immigrant, grew up in LA. My parents and family fled Iran after the revolution there. And so first generation American, grew up really diverse, friends and people of all different colors and religions. And around 6 years old, 7 years old, for some reason, I wanted to cure AIDS. I didn't know what AIDS was. I just saw it on the news. I'm like, and for some reason, as a kid, I always wanted to help people through medical breakthroughs. I don't know why, where this came from. And so that's been sort of that mission I've been on all throughout, high school and then medical school. And my PhD was on cancer biology. But I think that immigrant mentality, first generation, hungry, driven with a lot of expectation, but with that comes a lot of stress and emotional pain, which I've had to break through.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, is that any similarities to your background?
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more question about your childhood, and then I'll see if I can connect the dots with myself. So, in terms of your family was together, your parents were together. Do you have siblings?
Parents were together, they're still together, younger brother, 4 years younger. And yeah, we were the first of my family to move out. To, yeah.
Same here. That's why I was. I'm trying to paint the picture so people can see the similarities. As a kid, I know you mentioned that you had this, and I think I heard in another podcast you were on. You were into Showtime basketball, and
Oh, yes.
you were in LA. I didn't grow up in LA. I grew up in Philadelphia. I live in LA now for the last 15 plus years, but it's such a magical place to grow up because it's so diverse and so many different things going on. And I can definitely understand the connection with AIDS because I was growing up. I'm 52 years old, and when I was growing up, AIDS was just like it was such an unknown. It reminded me of this whole COVID thing in the beginning, but don't touch anybody, don't come near anybody, don't breathe in the air. And it was just crazy how much fear. So I can see the motivation. But were you the kid that sort of excelled in science and math, or were you into sports? Like,
Yeah.
what kind of kid were you?
Starting in high school, I started getting it, yeah, excelling in science, math and science. But as a kid, I was a pretty normal kid, and yeah, growing up in the '80s, Showtime Lakers, and we'd be at the arcade every day. Um, and yeah, for some reason in high school, I just got drawn to science, and Einstein was a personal hero, and just for some reason wanting to be at that cutting edge of science. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about this immigrant mentality, and I don't know, like it's unofficial sort of study, but I feel that there's something to be said because I was born in Lithuania. I came over when I was about 6 years old, so very similar, 1979, 80, whatever, same kind of timing. But do you feel that there's a certain journey that the immigrant is on that has this connection to succeed that is being pulled to that success and tremendous pressure from you, from your family, from everybody else, that also maybe people who are native to here, who live in the US, or maybe there's other countries as well, they may not have the same exact pull, the same exact pressure, and the same exact resilience that maybe is built into that whole immigrant mentality?
We're all different. I think a lot of us who were immigrants, we saw our parents really struggle, and part of that, I think there's this pain, right, that we experience, and we sort of are, some of us, driven in order to sort of justify the pain our parents went through, or turn it into something positive. And even if our parents didn't necessarily push us, I mean, my parents didn't necessarily push me, but I just seeing all of their struggle and coming to this country and working in low paying jobs, and struggling every day, made me want to do something and be somebody to one day say thank you for all of that pressure that you went through. I appreciate it. But of course, there are people growing up who are not immigrants who have that same pain. They've and actually, I talk about emotional pain in this book. That's
Yeah.
also something you may see with immigrants, is that emotional pain, ancestral pain, which is something that's hard to resolve. But it's one of the knots in this book that I talk about.
Yeah, I want to unpack that a little bit, but I think for definition's sake, I want to define because you started talking about the default mode. So maybe we can define for people a little bit
Yeah.
what the default mode really is.
It's a fancy term, but you know it. The people watching know all about it. It's essentially, the default mode network is your wandering mind. So if you notice throughout the day, there will be times where you're fully present, you're focused, and then suddenly your mind wanders, it drifts off, goes back to the past, some argument you had yesterday, or starts thinking about the future. So that wandering mind that's going away from the present, that is the default mode network. It hasn't had a name. Some of us have a really overactive default mode, people with ADHD, or people with depression who are always going back into the past, old memories that gives them pain. So we have a name for it now, and it turns out this default mode network has its hand in some mental conditions, including, I mentioned, ADHD, depression, but also anxiety, and even things like negativity and loneliness. So what this book is, this is self-help, it's personal growth, self-discovery, helping you really come to understand your default mode network and realize that it may be a source of your pain, and that you can, and it's not the real you. That's actually not who you really are. You are not your default mode network or your thoughts. And you can sort of free yourself from it through self-understanding.
I think it's a great point that you make, because you know, I I have ADHD or ADD, whatever. I wasn't a hyperactive kid. And one of the things that I think affected me is the diagnosis itself. When somebody tells you you have a disorder, oh shit, now there's something wrong with me. So now my mind starts thinking, all right, there's something wrong with me. What do I do to fix what's wrong with me, instead of reframing that? So I went through your book on some of that stuff. How do you master that so you can actually
Yeah.
thrive?
So first of all, I don't call it a disorder or a syndrome or a disease. I call it a knot, like a knot in a rope, or a muscle knot, right? Like a muscle knot. It's something that you can reverse. You're not stuck with it. And part of the problem with it, let's say ADHD, is we haven't really understood it until now. Now we're coming to realize people with ADHD, they experience like this pull, this force that pulls them out of the present moment. That force is the default mode network. And so when you really come to understand this default mode network and understand how to silence it, recognize when it comes up and label it, you can quiet this default mode network and overcome things like ADHD. There are many different ways of doing this, including therapy-based, non-therapy-based, spiritual-based, mindfulness-based, many different techniques, and they're all in this book. I put all the tools in one place, whether you're spiritual, religious, neither, doesn't matter. It's all the tools are in there.
So what would be, a quick shortcut? I want people to get your book and I want people to read it, but
Sure.
I want to get like a quick Cliff Notes version of a
Okay.
shortcut. What would one do? Or if they could start somewhere, because there's a lot of people who are listening. I talk to a lot of people, like, I want to do, it's overwhelming for people. Like they're getting ready to get ready, but it's like, oh my God, I have to meditate. I have to jump in a cold plunge. I have to do it. Oh my, it's
Yeah.
so much. Is there something that you can start with just to
Yes.
motivate people?
Definitely. I'll start with a very simple one, a focus exercise. Okay. It's 5 minutes where you set a timer for 5 minutes and you listen for 5 sounds around you. You feel 5 sensations. You look around and you notice 5 things. You spend 5 minutes doing a focus exercise. What you're doing in that is, by being present and by focusing, you're quieting that default mode network and you're empowering this other part of the brain, which is your observing mind. That also has a name. It's called your central executive network. What you're doing with focus exercises, with mindfulness exercises, you're building that observing mind as you would build a muscle. If you're getting ready for a marathon, you can't just show up and think you can run a marathon. You got to practice. Through focus exercises, you build your observing mind, and very slowly, it takes time, you can overcome this wandering mind and spend more time in the present. Um, and there's many other tools in this book. So what happens with medications for ADHD, right? So stimulants, right? Adderall, Ritalin, what do? There's a part of the brain, it's called the blue spot, very small part of the brain that connects with most regions of the cortex. And when you're focused, it turns on, the blue spot turns on. So for example, let's say you're driving down the freeway and your mind's wandering, you're not really focused, and suddenly you see a cop car behind you, you see the blue and red lights, suddenly your blue spot kicks in and you're focused. You feel that jolt of focus. That's actually your blue spot releasing adrenaline. And that's what Adderall does. It does the same thing. It's releasing stimulants and forcing, chemically allowing you to focus. But you can do the same thing through regular exercises. You spend 5 minutes at a time, 2-3 times a day. You can do the same thing naturally. And most importantly is to set the intention. I'm sure you do that. It's every day setting that intention. May I have focus today? Setting that intention is very important. You're using that central executive when you set your intention. That's really important.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely that, but it's systems. Like I live with this, and to me, this is my superpower. But if I don't have my systems, then my mind is always trying to find whatever that next stimulant is. So the idea is to force myself into a system and then reward myself from achieving that so I can get that hit and then continue on. And I think what happens, for people back in the day, we used to have a day timer where we used to write things down and all this stuff. So Stephen Covey was the one of the guys, Franklin Covey day timer kind of thing, and he talked about this
Yeah.
quadrant method where and I remember if you spend there's that urgent, important, important, not urgent, not important, urgent, not important kind of thing. So people spend so much, especially people with ADHD, spend so much time addressing fires. So being reactive to situations, then they need to escape and they go into their not urgent, not important. So what is that? That's all those things that, playing video games, being on your phone, like doing all these kind of different things. So I find that systems, for me, and I'm not saying it's for everybody, for me, but systems actually work well, but you have to have a reward system in place there because otherwise you're going to go into your fourth quadrant and just stay there because it's more fun. It's more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I do remember those days. But now, yeah, it's a lot harder to do that when we've got our phone and all these notifications popping up. And so part of it is exercising some restraint and being like, do I really need this app? Is this taking away my focus? And it's worth getting a bit more clarity and getting rid of some of these things that are just causing us more harm than good. But
what was the thought process like originally behind writing a book? How'd you decide?
yeah, this one was very simple. This one, I had a couple of years ago, my own breakthrough. In a way, it was about a 6-month process where I resolved a lot of deep-rooted issues, some emotional pain, anxiety. And this discovery of the default mode network really helped me because it was, it was objective. I was able to, there was a process I could follow. And so when I went and told other people about the default mode network, they hadn't heard of it. I asked my friends who are neurologists. I have a neurosurgeon friend. He hadn't heard of it. I was just shocked that 9 out of 10 people hadn't heard of this thing. So this was a book I had to get the word out, which was pretty tough. And I had a team of people helping me. But this book was to help people out there and inform the public about this massively important discovery, the default mode network. So that's the point of this book. Yeah.
How did you yourself go through the process of self-discovery, breaking through, and then thriving?
Yeah.
What did you have to do?
I'll never forget us. There was one day, actually, a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was in Cancun sitting on a beach and in deep misery. And I'm thinking, why am I so unhappy? I have a great job. I have a great family, young kids. And I remembered something from childhood, stories about Buddha, let's say, or people who awoke and an awakening. And there was just a motivation at right then. It's like, I need to awaken. Like whatever it takes, whatever I have to learn, there was just this deep drive that day that I have to start this journey. It's got to start today. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I need to awaken. And for me, it was about a 6-month process. And things like insight meditation or Vipassana was really helpful for me. And a lot of other tools that I put in this book. but it wasn't like suddenly I woke up one day and there was light shining and everything was amazing. It was a 6-month process for me, slowly chipping away the knots that I had accumulated, slowly chipping until one day I looked inside and I was like, yes, something's different. I look inside and there's light inside. There's happiness inside. My mood is positive. Whereas in the old days, the mood was always negative. There was always a negativity there. And so it was really coming to really understand this default mode network, this wandering mind, and developing a new relationship with it, having gratitude for it so that it started to work for me and not always going against me. That's basically the journey, yeah.
You didn't have your book. We have your book to follow, but you don't have that guide. So how did you know where to start, what to do, and then what are some of those things, and how did you get feedback? And did you do anything that maybe didn't align with you, or like, this is a quackery or some of that?
Yeah. I so that day on the beach in Cancun, when I came back to LA, went to the library and I found a book from that the Dalai Lama had written about. It was a book about Buddhist practice. Read Eckhart Tolle and you know Christian books. I was open to everything, and what I found missing in, let's say, the books by Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, amazing book, life-changing. But what was missing in it was some of that science and medicine. Like what exactly is going on in the brain? And so that part of it, I sort of read on my own. I just looked up papers because I am a scientist and started learning about this default mode network and why is it doing the things that it does, looking up scientific papers. And then I realized, wow, this is a huge body of information. I need to somehow get this out there for my own kids so that when they grow up, they don't have to suffer the way I did and they've got a resource. So that was actually the main audience I was writing this for were my kids.
Yeah.
So they'd have some tools. Yeah.
No, it makes total sense. In personal discovery, it takes you into rabbit holes, right? Like you get into this, like Eckhart Tolle, you said, or for me, I tried from Joe Dispenza, Tony Robbins to and it's still going on. And now your book is my next in line. So, but through the journey, there's also things that I read and I did. I'm like, I think maybe it's because I also have a sciencey mind. I'm like, I get it, but I don't get it. However, I'll ask this question this way. Are you familiar with Dr. John Sarno and his work?
No, I'm
So
not.
he wrote this book. So I have a back issue, and it's a physical back issue, but it doesn't hurt all the time. But sometimes there's pain. So I was laid out years ago, and they were trying to schedule an epidural for me. And I was really scared. I'm like, I don't want an epidural. I remember my ex-wife giving birth. I remember that whole thing. You're going to taste metal in your mouth. You're going to be like, oh shit. I almost passed out even listening to that. So, and I was listening to Howard Stern back in the day, and he had somebody on who had back pain, and he was like, did you ever, before you do that, it could be psychosomatic, could be something, read Dr. John Sarno. So he wrote these book one of them is called Healing Back Pain, and the other one's The Mind-Body Connection. So the theory, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, it's been years since I read it, but it's sort of where we store our stress, and that stress inflammation can then cause the pain and discomfort. Different people, some people get migraines, some people get, their neck hurts. Yeah, mine is luckily my lower back. So the question in all this, really long-winded, but do you feel there is a placebo effect in healing?
There is. I mean, you mentioned some authors earlier who I don't necessarily agree with what they're saying because they call themselves scientists, but it doesn't seem like anything scientific. But they have an intention of helping others, and the placebo effect is real. So in principle, I have nothing against somebody whose intention it is to help others. Um, but personally, as a scientist, I'm not going to come up with some theory that's not backed by science, or that's just that's a big no for me. Stress is real, though. I mean, stress is something that it's actual chemicals released by the brain that can wreak havoc on the body, that can worsen pain. So preventing stress, learning how to prevent stress, can improve your physical health and your pain level. So that, I mean, that part of it is real science for sure.
Yeah. How are genetics involved in people's, I'll say, predisposition? I can't think of a different word because I'm in the genetic space, to these conditions. And I'm not talking about diseases, cancer we can talk about. I'm talking about specifically, you mentioned anxiety, depressive states, or things of that nature. Are genetics, do the genetics play a role in that?
Genetics do play a role, definitely. They're really complex diseases, so understanding the genetics has been pretty challenging, because it's complicated, and something may be inherited, but not necessarily genetic, maybe based on childhood experiences growing up with a parent who had depression, and maybe that wasn't genetic, but it could have happened just from that experience. But that being said, yes, there is a genetic component. I think we're still understanding that. It's a bit more ways to go there.
Yeah, I think I heard you talking about the Human Genome Project before. There was so I have a genetics company, so I kind of tend to look at that, and then one of the things I think is that you're also alluding to is experiences, right? So if you have a parent in a household that has going through clinical depression or something like that, you can learn that behavior. It's not necessarily genetic, but it's learned behavior that's you can see that's been modeled for you. And what happens, I think, a lot is people replicate that behavior and continue the lineage of the behavior, not necessarily genetic. So it takes some balls, I guess, for somebody to say, I'm going to break that trend and do something completely different than was done for generations and generations, because that's the only example I know. And so is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Yes. And one of the big drivers here is the default mode network. So you may have memories of childhood that pop up from time to time. It's very normal. And what happens, that's the default mode network that turns on, that takes you back into the past, brings those memories back. And any emotions tied to that memory also comes right back as if you're transported back into the past. And so for a lot of people with depression, they're constantly in cycles of blame or guilt or hurt because these old memories, the default mode network keeps bringing them up. And so again, so part of this is learning about this default mode network, how to silence it, how to break the connection between that memory and the emotions. And you can work with a therapist. There are things like cognitive behavioral therapy, radical acceptance, where you can resolve the emotion. And that can be a big breakthrough for patients with depression. And psychedelics are you hear about them all the time. They're not approved, but how do they work? They shut off the default mode network, and I think will be a tool also for psychiatrists at some point. Not quite yet, but it's coming, I think.
Yeah, I think you're supporting neuroplasticity, and the issue with psychedelics, in my opinion, is when people do that, and as you said, they shut down the default mode network, create neuroplasticity. So you're actually able to start, having new thoughts appear. What I think happens is if you don't have an expert to reintroduce you or to grab that and run with it to try to build on that, you sort of revert back, or you can go in a different direction. So it needs to be combined with therapy as well. So I was I came from an abusive household. My dad was very abusive, and I mean it's great now. I'm just thinking that there was a cycle, and when I talked to him, he had that done to him, and it created this generational thing. And I made a decision to break that cycle internally, with my family, basically. It
Nice.
did, but I don't even. I just said I really didn't like that. So let me kind of do a 180. Was there something in your upbringing or something in your childhood? Because I'm envisioning you sitting on this beach, and I understand that because I went through the same things. I'm like, I have all the things that I want. I have my financials are in good shape. I think I have a good relationship with my family. I probably didn't, but these are all things that I created for myself. Why am I still not happy? Oh, maybe I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm not connecting my purpose and all that stuff. But there was a certain pattern that made me go back and so did you have something similar
Yeah,
that
absolutely. So emotional pain for me was ancestral, also handed down generation after generation. Just like you, I was like, I don't want to hand this pain to my kids. And for me, ultimately, what resolved that emotional pain finally, once and for all, was forgiveness, the power of forgiveness, truly, truly forgiving my parents for the pain that they gave to me and what came before them. And that kind of ended the cycle. There was also self-forgiveness, which ironically actually starts with taking accountability and being like, I need to stop blaming everybody else for my problems. I'm going to take accountability, feel that remorse, allow that remorse to restore and renew. And so that emotional pain, there's a whole chapter on it. It's the second knot in the book. The first one is stress, actually.
yeah.
The second is emotional pain. The third is actually addiction or addictive craving. Those are the big three that are tough
Yeah,
knots.
I definitely I wanted addiction was the next thing what I want to talk to you about. But I'm so glad you said that because you know you're so 100% right. When I was able to let go and forgive my dad, my parents, more my dad, uh, it changed my entire relationship with him. It changed my relationship with me. It changed my relationship with the people around me. Fantastic. The one thing that you just said, I'm still working on, and it's just forgiveness of myself. That kind of thing, that's been a lot more challenging to be able to. Accountability, I always put everything on my shoulders. I am accountable for everything, but it's that, I don't know, still not good enough. It's still, when I talked to my girlfriend about this, it was funny. I said to her, I feel subconsciously that I'm still trying to please my parent. I want them to be proud of me. And I think they're not for some reason, no matter what I achieve, because I didn't do it in their way. So how were
Oh,
you able to do
so
that?
I very similar. So two things that really helped with that. And so there is a knot on negativity. That's actually the fourth knot. Loneliness is another one. The two big things are gratitude is number one. And I try to have gratitude multiple times a day just for existing, just for breathing. That's it. Just gratitude for breathing and compassion for other people, trying to always care about the suffering of others. Those two were transformational for me. I know it sounds corny, but they're powerful because what you're doing when you use those like compassion and gratitude, forgiveness is you're countering the default mode network. The default mode network is essentially your ego, and it wants you to survive. That's what it's trying to do. So it's very selfish. It wants you to beat others, to be more successful than others, because it thinks that's how we become happy, which is actually not true. So you have to challenge this thing. Otherwise, it's going to take over and run life the way it thinks it should. But when you have compassion, when you have gratitude, you challenge that default mode, you free yourself from it, and I think you start being happy with who you are in this moment.
Yeah, such powerful statements. I completely agree with you, and that's the journey. It's being able to. It's that competitive nature of, and I think for me, consciously and subconsciously, I revert back all the time. So I'm work in progress. And consciously, when I get this competitive fire and I have that, it's just competing with me. It just let me be better tomorrow than I was today. Let me just compete with me. 'Cause I'm never going to win against anybody else. It doesn't matter. I just got to compete with me kind of thing. But there's definitely some roadblocks along the way
Yeah.
to get there for sure. You mentioned addiction. I wanted to sort of get your understanding of definition of addiction,
Mhm.
and then addiction can be physical addiction, can be mental, right? Is there
Yeah. Yeah. So I call it a softer term, addictive craving. It's a little
okay,
softer than addiction. And it's craving that's harmful to you or to your family. And not all cravings are bad. There's nothing wrong with a craving. If you're tired, you crave sleep, that's listen to your body, get some sleep. But if the cravings are causing harm to you or your family, and maybe it is smoking or alcohol, maybe it's a smartphone addiction or social media, maybe it's an addiction to money or title, promotion. I mean, there's all different kinds of addictions. I think for me, addiction to success, money, title was something I overcame. And so you got to look inside and ask yourself, is this causing me harm or not? Am I actually struggling with addiction? And so the process of overcoming that, number one, intention. May I be happy and healthy and overcome this thing. That's how you start the journey, right? The process of surrendering. This default mode network has its hand big time in addiction. So learning to surrender this ego, and whether that's surrendering to God, surrendering to the Dharma, or whatever you want to surrender to, it doesn't matter. But after surrendering, and psychedelics actually can do that surrender very well, which can be very painful actually. Um, but like you said, it's that surrender is not um, by itself enough. You need the power, a higher power, insightful awareness, insights coming from a higher power to lead you out of that darkness. For some people, those insights come from God. From some people, those insights come from their deeper subconscious mind, but they pop up. And suddenly they pop up, and you're like, and when they pop up, you've got to listen, and it'll take you out of that darkness. It may take some time, but so that I cover all of that. Yeah.
so I read this surrender is a big challenge for me. Control. I like
Yeah.
to control my situations. So I read this book by Michael Singer, The Surrender Experiment, and I'm like, oh, I can do that. And it was last like a couple days maybe for me because he surrendered everything. He just, I'm just, I struggle with that extremely. And you're right. And I had a psychedelic experience. And by the way, I'm not telling anybody to do what I do, kind of thing. But I did a 5-MeO DMT experience twice, and the first time, as you said, it was one of the most scary experience. I can still feel it. It was so scary. It felt like I was falling. It was probably my ego death or whatever the experts say. But I felt like I died. And the thing that I remember, I was falling, and I think there was a ladder or something that I was trying to hold on to these rungs so I don't fall, and it just wasn't working. And that was it. And the person that was I was with after it was like a 15-minute kind of journey, but it seemed like it was like 15 hours of that. And I come out of that, and the guy's like, explain. I was shook. I explained it. He's like, why are you holding on? Or why are you trying to hold on? Like, well, you're being told something
Yeah.
and let go. And the next time that I had that journey, I did that and I had a fantastic magical experience. Strange and odd. I don't even know how to describe it, but
Yeah.
but it's that notion of trying to hold on and surrender. So there's a fine line between that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's
That ego of ours, it's strong, man.
yeah.
That default mode network, it holds on. I mean, what it's trying to do, okay, it keeps control. It wants life to happen a certain way, right? We think this is, based on everything we've experienced and what we want in the future, it wants the present moment to happen in a certain way. And when it doesn't happen that way, we feel dissatisfaction. And I think it's hard to let go, but sometimes the best thing is to let go of this ego. And that's what I did, and I found happiness by letting go. For some people, it's hitting rock bottom. That's when they're finally able to just surrender this thing. I know many people who did that, but it's much better to surrender before hitting rock bottom.
For
I
sure.
mean, that's a painful process.
For sure. You brought this up a little while ago about loneliness. So I wanted to ask you, do you feel loneliness is a big contributor to the mental illness, the increase of mental illness that's I feel is happening today? And I've talked to many experts and they say that. And the combination of COVID and loneliness, especially for the younger generation that were isolated for 2 years almost, give or take. Do you feel that it was a major contributing factor or is a major?
Absolutely. Yeah, there were studies showing after COVID just a alarming rise in all kinds of mental health conditions, anxiety and depression. Um, and yeah, the COVID pandemic proved that social isolation, loneliness can wreak havoc on our bodies. It doesn't help that things like social media can make us feel really isolated also. And also the belief system today. The belief system today is around me and I, right? And what's best for me and I, and that creates loneliness. And so the thing is, loneliness is reversible. You can get yourself out of it.
Yeah, by
People,
meeting somebody, right? Then you're no longer lonely.
well, some
You can
people,
still be lonely if you in a
some
relationship
people,
too.
yeah, exactly. Some people feel lonely even though they have a family. Because their social needs are not being met. But the default mode network has its hand in this big time, and you can reverse loneliness. It starts by cultivating things like compassion, let's say, which sounds really disgusting when you're stuck in that state, like the thought of actually caring for somebody else. Ugh. But you challenge that default mode a little bit at a time, compassion exercises, 5 minutes a day, you'll feel the loneliness start to reverse, actually. And I think back and I remember periods in my life where I felt that loneliness. And I wish somebody had told me that, like, what you're feeling is happening in your own brain. You can reverse it, and you can free yourself from that.
You mentioned, I may get this wrong because I didn't get through your whole book. I was just skimming through, but I remember uh, reading something about anxiety and anger. Uh, is there a correlation between anxiety and anger? Is
There
that what
is.
you're trying to
Yeah.
make? Mhm.
A lot of times, so anger is it's called a secondary emotion, and anxiety and anger are really interconnected. So somebody who is really worried about the future, has anxiety, they're more likely to be irritable, and um, and they may express themselves in outbursts because they feel like they don't have control of a situation, right? If you're an anxious parent and your kid is doing something that you think is just not what they should be doing, you may have an angry outburst. That's actually a reflection of your own anxiety. So someone asked me, what is the advice you can give for a new parent? And I said, the best advice is to work on you. Like, if you have some underlying anxiety, to manage it, to get at the root causes of it, and then you'll be a better parent that way. So the
Uh,
two are definitely linked, yeah.
I'm going to throw one more thing into this soup that we're making here of anxiety and anger. Lying. Do you feel like lying. People who are in this situation lie. They lie to themselves. They convince themselves, and then they go out and they start lying and get in this habitual system of lying, which then they know themselves that it's not true. They don't feel good about themselves. It creates anxiety, and it's on this hamster wheel. Uh,
Yeah.
and if that's the case, what do you do about that? And
So,
do you
yeah.
call people out? If you already know this, because I have people in my life that I can clearly see this pattern, and we see. I have conversations, my girlfriend about that, where you can see it, and it's clear. And I've called these people in these situations, but it still kind
Yeah.
of
I
perpetuates
mean, the
itself.
way I would frame it is dishonesty and denial actually hurts your physical health. And why is it that lie detector tests work, right? Is because when we tell a lie, it actually triggers the stress response. There's a rise in our heart rate, and stress hormones like cortisol can damage our bodies. So the thing is that self-denial,
Hmm.
that is a big problem because you can't break through to that, let's say, awakened state, if you want to call it that, if you're in a state of denial. You have to be able to look inside with complete honesty and acceptance, which is what you do, by the way, in a prayer or in a mindfulness. You look inside with complete honesty and acceptance. No matter what you see, you just observe that. And that's how you can break through. So when you commit to integrity and virtue and integrity, you're committing to better health, actually, and the process of awakening. And I realized that was one of the biggest parts of that awakening process, is saying, I'm going to be fully honest with myself and what I experience, and stop running away from things. Just observe it, right? And there's nothing to be afraid of. Just look at it with full honesty.
Can you call people out? Or how do you, like, I understand when it comes to
Yeah.
yourself, and you said, some people have to hit rock bottom, but if you have somebody in your life,
Yeah.
do I just go, hey, here's a
Well,
gift of your book? Go ahead, man.
I
Read
would,
that.
I mean, you don't want to, antagonize somebody and make an enemy, but at the same time, you want to tell them in a way that shows that you care about them, that, hey, man, um, think about, lies can damage your health. Lies can damage your health. And rather than making it confrontational, um, but if someone's not ready to hear that, they're going to get angry.
Yeah,
So
I've,
that's the problem. They have to be
I've experienced
ready
that.
to hear
I
it.
definitely experienced that. Want to talk about lifestyle changes. How does lifestyle impact one's ability to thrive? And if you were going to make suggestions, and I know you talked a lot about, mindfulness and kind of practice, but are there other physical things that you can do in your lifestyle choices that can impact or
Yeah.
help you to break through and thrive?
So there's a chapter on lifestyle. So this is diet, sleep, and exercise.
Mhm.
And I go through the latest science in terms of what is the best diet, what is the best sleep. But the biggest point of that chapter is you can more easily get that lifestyle you want by resolving your knots, by resolving your stress, your emotional pain, your addictive craving. When you conquer those, when you really break through that emotional pain, and you no longer overeat
Yeah.
because you're dealing with some depression and emotional pain, it becomes a lot easier to lose weight and to have a healthy diet, almost effortless. One of the things I noticed in that, I mentioned that 6-month process, towards the end of the 6 months, I lost like 10 pounds. And I was like, what the heck? And I never went back to my old weight. It's because I wasn't overeating to deal with my stress or my, emotional pain. So a lot of this is, and it's hardest at the beginning, but every day it gets a little easier. And after a few months, um, it's a lot easier to go to the gym and have a good workout.
Yeah, it creates more of a habit that way.
Definitely.
But I guess I would say, because I've dealt with a lot of people that are stuck in this cycle, right? And I feel if they can get a win, one win, it'll help build momentum. So, is there anything that you would recommend or suggest as, like, start here and so you can get an easy win? Is it get more sleep? Is it cut out sugar? Like, what would you suggest,
I
or
would,
none of
well,
those?
sleep. Yeah, I would. Number one is stress. Number one is stress.
Yeah.
Learning how to prevent stress from happening rather than when that stress hits, reaching for the glass of wine or what. If you can find ways of just, not major, but cut the stress down 20-30% through things like, for some people, maybe it's a prayer, maybe it's a mindfulness, maybe it's part of it, maybe sleep, actually learning to get better sleep. That will definitely reduce your stress. Once you get that stress under control, all these other knots become a lot easier to tackle. So I would start there. Maybe it's calm music before bed, or maybe it's putting the phone away for an hour before bed, whatever. And there's all these are listed in the book.
Yeah.
When you start to see a little bit of change, it tastes amazing and you want more. So that's why I put
That's
stress at the beginning.
Yeah, that's what I meant. When people have one taste of that success, you want that success. I'm just framing success,
Yeah.
and I've reached something, or oh, I gave up. Like I haven't eaten meat in, I don't know, 15 years or so.
Wow.
I mean, it was in the beginning, I love steak. I love buffalo wings. It's incredible. But after a while, no more. Like I don't have that craving. So by going through that and saying, well, what else can I do? It's that kind of thing. So you have one, and I keep saying success. And if you can't see me, I'm making air quotes because it's not success, but you've achieved an achievement of some sorts. You've defined a goal for yourself. You reach that goal, and maybe it's that whole ADD thing where I get my dopamine release. I got that. What's next kind of thing where it's my own. I can't like stay in that moment for too long. It's what's next kind of thing. But I think it makes a difference when people can, overcome something and have that.
Definitely. I mean, even sleep for some people is not getting to first base, right? I mean, for some people, sleep is a tough challenge. So I would start something quick and easy. It's called the relaxation response. It basically, what it is you're releasing something called GABA in the brain. If you do, let's say 20 minutes of mindfulness, you start to feel that relaxation response.
Yeah.
So finding those exercises that do that for you, maybe it's taking a walk, maybe it's taking a bath or gardening, whatever it is, but learning to get that relaxation response going.
Yeah.
Takes about 15 minutes. I would start there.
Got it. Okay, cool. I'm going to jump into some questions that I ask all my guests, music related stuff, not related to a lot of the stuff. Maybe it is related. I don't know. We'll see. But do you remember, and if so, what was the very first concert that you ever attended?
Wow. The very first concert I think was Rage Against the Machine in the 90s. Yeah, it's
Nice
like
one.
97, maybe 90. Yeah, around then.
What was the last concert?
The last concert, let's see. I saw Depeche Mode earlier this year at the Forum.
I was there too. It was
Oh, was there?
incredible.
That was a great concert.
Great show,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, for the next year, you can only listen to 5 albums. Now, you don't have to remember the name of the album. You can say Rage Against the Machine, even though that was self-titled, the first one. But what would be those 5 albums?
Wow. So 5 albums. I'd have to put I'd probably start with, well, let's start with Depeche Mode, right? They have so many albums, but
It's fine. Depeche Mode.
Violator,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
probably Violator.
Mm.
I would put Sade, completely different, maybe Greatest Hits. And let's see, more recently, I love some of the big bands of the 80s, like Journey. I'd probably put Journey. There's a theme here, I guess you're seeing. Um, and I like Cantoma. Cantoma's an artist. They're kind of lighter, more recent artist. And last but not least, probably the Beatles,
Cool.
Sergeant Pepper.
Okay. All right. So, final bonus question. please describe what your room looked like growing up.
Growing up was a mess with papers everywhere, papers and books. With that planner that you mentioned, where you write in your schedule, that was usually in the mix, and just a complete mess.
Any posters on the walls, any artwork, anything distinctive that you can recall?
Probably, yeah, probably a Nirvana poster was up there at some point, and some, yeah, nature art, nothing in particular.
Got it. Um, Saying, where can people buy Breakthrough and Master Your Default Mode and Thrive book? Where can people get engaged with you? Where can they connect? Share.
Yeah. So yeah, the website is yourdefaultmode.com, which oh, it's right here.
Yeah.
And you can actually read the book for free. There's a link to the audiobook and the paperback. My social media handles are at the bottom of the page, and would love to connect. I had somebody reach out to me on Instagram saying that they struggled with depression and this book helped them, and that's why I wrote this, to help folks out there. So yeah, and Rick Doblin endorsed this book. He's a hero of mine. He's working hard on the front lines, but we all have the
MDMA.
same mission.
MDMA.
That's right.
That's
Yeah,
right.
had a setback recently, but he's still
Yeah, I'm a member of MAPS, been a member of MAPS for many years. I know Rick, and I've attended many meetings, and we tried very hard. It's fine, because there's a shift that's coming. I don't mean to kind of take this over, but there's a shift. We can clearly all see it. We saw it when Epidiolex was approved as a drug by now Jazz Pharmaceuticals, but GW. Sativex was not, but there's a variation in the EU that's being utilized. Ketamine is now being repurposed, I guess, from what we initially thought of as a special K in a rave culture. It's making a lot of changes, and Ibogaine in Mexico, we've and I said this before on the show, we work with a lot of veterans, and I have one of my really close friends, the investor in my company and partner, was a medic for a SEAL team, and we were able to help a lot of soldiers get out. And but during COVID, we lost, like, I think it was 13 of them to suicide. And we wanted to, engage in psychedelic therapies, which were incredible. And from that time, not one. So I definitely,
absolutely
say that's a great way for us to pursue. So for my audience, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sticking with us. I hope it was of interest. If it was, leave a review, 5 stars, please. If it wasn't, leave a review anyway. Let us know what you didn't like, where we can improve. Thank you for purchasing my book, Making Cannabis Personal. And I just want to thank you so much. I think what you're doing, first of all, on the cancer research front, I commend you. I think it's hugely important. Everybody who's listening knows somebody or has lost somebody to this, awful disease. But I also think the connection that you're making with a lot of this default mode network to suppressing maybe even the diseases that you may be genetically prone to epigenetically keep them at bay. I think it's all works together. So I thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. All right.